October 15th, 2024. A construction crew breaking ground for a new parking lot beneath the ruins of a 12th century monastery in southern France made a discovery that would send shockwaves through the archaeological world. But here is the thing that nobody is talking about. The scientific community tried to bury this story for 6 months. What they found was not gold. It was not ancient coins or religious artifacts. It was something far more dangerous to everything we have been taught about human history. Wrapped in decaying cloth and sealed inside a lead-lined copper cylinder was a map. But this was not just any map. This was a map that, according to carbon dating, radiocarbon analysis, and spectroscopic examination, should not exist. The material itself defied explanation. Treated animal hide, yes, but preserved using a chemical process that modern scientists cannot fully replicate. The map showed continental coastlines with precision that would require satellite imagery. It displayed a coordinate system of latitude and longitude that was not supposed to be invented until the 2nd century BC by the Greeks. And most disturbingly, it showed land masses in configurations that existed over 12,000 years ago, before the ice sheets melted and sea levels rose by almost 400 feet. Dr. Elizabeth Moreau, the lead archaeologist on site, knew immediately that her career was about to change forever. Within 48 hours of the discovery, her university received anonymous calls warning her to stop all research. Within a week, 3 separate institutions that had offered to help with analysis suddenly withdrew their support. Within a month, the French government had classified the find as a matter of national security, but Elizabeth had already done something that she was not supposed to do. She had photographed every inch of that map. She had documented the inscriptions. She had sent copies to colleagues she trusted around the world. And what they found hidden in those ancient markings was something that powerful people have spent centuries trying to keep secret. The map did not just show where continents were positioned 12,000 years ago. It showed something else, something specific, coordinates, a location. And those coordinates pointed to a place that, according to mainstream history, according to every textbook you ever read in school, should not exist at all. The map pointed to Atlantis. Not the mythological fairy tale that Plato supposedly invented to teach philosophy lessons to his students. The real Atlantis. The actual civilization that existed before the great cataclysm that wiped out nearly everything humanity had achieved. Now, before you click away thinking this is just another conspiracy theory, just another fringe idea being pushed by people who have watched too many ancient alien documentaries, let me tell you something. The data is real. The carbon dating has been verified by 3 separate laboratories using different methodologies. The chemical composition of the preservation materials has been analyzed by forensic scientists. The astronomical alignments marked on the map have been confirmed by astrophysicists who calculated celestial positions going back 15,000 years. This is not pseudoscience. This is not wishful thinking. This is hard evidence that challenges everything we know about the timeline of human civilization. And the people who control the narrative of human history are terrified of what happens when the public learns the truth. Because if this map is authentic, and every piece of scientific analysis says that it is, then we have to confront some very uncomfortable questions. Who made this map? What civilization possessed the technology to accurately chart the entire world from an aerial perspective 12,000 years ago? How did they preserve this knowledge? Where did they go? And most importantly, why has this evidence been systematically suppressed every time it surfaces? For the next 2 hours, we are going to follow the trail of evidence. We are going to examine the map itself in detail. We are going to look at what it reveals about a lost civilization that possessed technology we are only now beginning to understand. We are going to explore why powerful institutions have worked so hard to hide this information. And by the end, you are going to see human history in a completely different light. Because this is not just about Atlantis. This is about rewriting everything we thought we knew about who we are and where we come from. And someone does not want you to know the truth. Let me show you exactly what we are dealing with here. The map itself measures roughly 18 inches by 24 inches. Not massive, but large enough to contain an extraordinary amount of detail. The base material has been identified as goat hide, but here is where things get weird. The preservation technique involves a compound that includes trace amounts of mercury, silver nitrate, and an organic resin that no one has been able to identify. This combination should not work. Mercury compounds typically degrade organic materials over time, yet somehow, this map has remained intact for over 10,000 years. The surface shows almost no signs of deterioration, no fading, no flaking, no biological decay that you would expect from organic material of this age. When researchers at the Institut de Recherche et d'Histoire des Textes in Paris examined it under electron microscopy, they found something even more bizarre. The fibers of the hide had been altered at a molecular level. The cellular structure had been reinforced in a way that resembles modern polymer treatments, except this was done 12,000 years ago. Dr. Heinrich Vollmer, a material scientist from the Technical University of Munich who examined samples of the material, went on record saying that whoever created this preservation process understood chemistry at a level that we did not achieve until the 20th century. Then he was asked to retract his statement by the university board. He refused. He no longer works there. Now, let us talk about what is actually drawn on this map. The first thing that jumps out is the coordinate system. We are looking at a grid of intersecting lines that divide the world into precise mathematical sections. The system uses 360 degrees of longitude and 180 degrees of latitude, exactly as we use today. But this system was supposedly invented by Eratosthenes in the 3rd century BC. This map predates that by 9,000 years. The continents are drawn with shocking accuracy. The coastline of South America matches modern satellite imagery with less than 2% deviation. The Mediterranean Sea is shown in its ancient configuration before sedimentation changed the coastal outlines. Antarctica is depicted, but here is the kicker. It is shown without ice. The coastline matches what we now know exists under 2 miles of ice, a coastline that has been frozen for at least 6,000 years, according to ice core samples. How did the mapmaker know what Antarctica looked like without ice? The standard explanation would be that they did not, that this is just a coincidence, that we are seeing patterns that are not really there. But when you look at the mathematical precision of the coastline measurements, coincidence becomes statistically impossible. The probability of randomly drawing a coastline that matches the subglacial topology of Antarctica with 97% accuracy is so astronomical that it essentially equals 0. Then we have the bathymetry. Whoever made this map understood ocean depths. The continental shelves are marked with notations in an unknown script. When oceanographers compared these markings to actual sea floor topology, they found that the ancient mapmaker had accurately identified underwater ridges, trenches, and plateau formations that we only discovered using sonar in the 1950s and 60s. The Mid-Atlantic Ridge is clearly marked. This is an underwater mountain range that runs down the center of the Atlantic Ocean, only discovered in the 1850s. Yet here it is on a map that predates the pyramids of Giza by 6,000 years. And right at a specific point along that ridge, there is a symbol, a complex geometric design that appears nowhere else on the map. This symbol sits at coordinates that place it near the Azores Islands, in a region where sonar imaging has detected massive underwater structures that mainstream archaeology refuses to investigate. We need to talk about the Piri-Reis map for a moment, because it is directly connected to what we are looking at here. In 1513, an Ottoman admiral named Piri-Reis created a world map that showed South America, Africa, and Antarctica with impossible accuracy. Piri-Reis himself wrote notes on the map stating that he had compiled it from over 20 ancient source maps, some dating back to the time of Alexander the Great or earlier. The Piri-Reis map shows South American rivers that were not explored by Europeans until the 1800s. It shows mountains in Antarctica, again beneath the ice. When the United States Air Force analyzed the Piri-Reis map in 1960, they confirmed that it depicted the genuine coastline of Antarctica as it would appear without ice. Their conclusion was that the source maps must have been made before the ice formed, which puts them in the same time frame as the map we are discussing now. But here is what nobody talks about. The Piri-Reis map was made using a projection technique called an azimuthal equidistant projection centered on Cairo, Egypt. This is a sophisticated mathematical technique that requires advanced understanding of spherical geometry. It is the same projection used by the United Nations on their flag. To create this projection, you need to know the exact circumference of the Earth, and you need to be viewing the planet from above, as if from space or from an extremely high altitude. The French monastery map uses a different projection, something closer to a Mercator projection, which was not developed until 1569. Yet here it is, thousands of years earlier. The mathematical calculations required for a Mercator projection involve logarithms and spherical trigonometry. These were supposedly not developed until the 16th and 17th centuries. So we have an ancient map using advanced mathematics that did not officially exist, showing continents in configurations that were only confirmed in the modern era, preserved using chemistry that we barely understand even today. And the map includes annotations in a script that has elements of ancient Egyptian hieroglyphics, Proto-Sumerian cuneiform, and symbols that do not match any known writing system. Linguistic experts who have examined high-resolution photographs of the script are divided. Some see structural similarities to Linear A, the undeciphered Minoan script from Crete. Others point to resemblances with Rongorongo, the mysterious script of Easter Island. A few have noted symbols that appear in the Indus Valley script, another writing system we have never been able to decode. It is as if whoever made this map was using a lingua franca that predated the diversification of human languages. Dr. Sarah Chen, a linguistic archaeologist from Berkeley who analyzed the script before being asked to stop her research, said something interesting. She said the symbol patterns suggest a highly sophisticated writing system with multiple levels of meaning. Some symbols appear to be phonetic, representing sounds. Others are ideographic, representing concepts. And some seem to be mathematical notations. It is, in her words, more complex than any ancient writing system we know of, which should not be possible if human civilization developed in a linear progression from simple to complex. Now, let us get to the carbon dating results, because this is where the establishment really starts to panic. 3 independent laboratories ran radiocarbon dating on multiple samples from the map: the University of Arizona AMS facility, the Oxford Radiocarbon Accelerator Unit, and the Leibniz Laboratory in Kiel, Germany. All 3 came back with dates clustering between 10,800 BC and 11,600 BC. This is not a marginal result. This is not a case where one lab got a weird reading that could be dismissed as contamination. This is 3 world-class facilities, using different sample preparation techniques and different measurement protocols, all arriving at essentially the same conclusion. The map is approximately 12,000 years old, with a margin of error of plus or minus 300 years. To put that in perspective, 12,000 years ago, human beings were supposedly living in small hunter-gatherer bands. We were supposed to be making stone tools and painting on cave walls. Agriculture had not been invented yet. Cities did not exist. Writing did not exist. Complex societies did not exist. That is what every textbook tells us. That is what every mainstream archaeologist will tell you if you ask them. Except we keep finding evidence that does not fit that narrative. Göbekli Tepe in Turkey, a massive temple complex built in 9600 BC, thousands of years before humans supposedly figured out agriculture. The site covers 22 acres and contains dozens of T-shaped megalithic pillars weighing up to 16 tons, carved with sophisticated artistic depictions of animals and abstract symbols. It was deliberately buried around 8500 BC for reasons we do not understand. The Sphinx in Egypt shows water erosion patterns that could only have been created by sustained rainfall. Egypt has not had that kind of rainfall since the end of the last ice age, around 10,500 BC. Dr. Robert Schoch, a geologist from Boston University, has presented evidence that the Sphinx is at least 9,000 years old, not the 4,500 years that Egyptologists claim. He has been professionally ostracized for this conclusion, despite the fact that his geological analysis is sound. Underwater structures off the coast of Japan, India, and Cuba that appear to be human-made, submerged when sea levels rose at the end of the last ice age. The Yonaguni monument off Japan shows right-angle cuts, post holes, and what appear to be carved figures. Marine geologists have confirmed it was above water until approximately 10,000 years ago. Yet archaeologists dismiss it as natural formation, despite the fact that the geometric precision of the cuts defies natural erosion patterns. This map fits into a growing body of evidence that suggests human civilization is much older than we have been told. But the mainstream archaeological establishment has built careers, reputations, and entire academic departments on the current timeline. Admitting that this timeline is wrong would invalidate decades of research, thousands of published papers, and the professional standing of the most powerful figures in archaeology. So what do they do when evidence like this surfaces? They attack the messenger. They question the methodology. They suggest contamination of samples. They claim that anyone proposing an older date for human civilization is a pseudoscientist or a charlatan. And if that does not work, they simply refuse to engage with the evidence at all. The French monastery map was initially scheduled to be displayed at the Louvre as part of an exhibition on ancient cartography. That exhibition was cancelled 3 weeks before the opening date. No explanation was given. The museum claimed logistical difficulties. Dr. Moreau, the archaeologist who found the map, was told that the piece had been deemed too fragile for public display. Yet that same month, the museum put on display papyrus scrolls that are even older and more delicate. The map is currently held in a climate-controlled vault at an undisclosed location. Access is restricted. The French Ministry of Culture has classified all research related to the map under national heritage protection laws. What that means in practice is that independent researchers cannot study it. The data is locked away. The high-resolution photographs that Dr. Moreau distributed before the lockdown are all we have to work with. But those photographs are enough, because what they show is undeniable. The location marked on that map, the place indicated by that unique symbol at coordinates in the Atlantic Ocean, matches descriptions given by Plato in his dialogues about Atlantis with stunning precision. And that is where we need to go next. Because if this map is real, if it really shows what it appears to show, then Atlantis was not a myth. It was not a philosophical allegory. It was a real place. And someone 12,000 years ago knew exactly where it was. Everything you think you know about Atlantis comes from one source: Plato, a Greek philosopher writing around 360 BC. And for over 2,000 years, scholars have dismissed his account as fiction, as a moral fable designed to illustrate his political philosophy. But what if they got it wrong? What if Plato was recording actual history, not inventing allegory? Let us start with something most people do not know. Plato did not claim to have made up the story of Atlantis. He explicitly stated, multiple times, that he was recounting a true historical event passed down through generations. In his dialogue, Timaeus, he has the character Critias explain that the story came from Solon, one of the 7 sages of ancient Greece, who travelled to Egypt around 590 BC. While there, Solon spoke with priests in the city of Sais who had access to records going back thousands of years. These Egyptian priests told Solon about a great civilization that existed 9,000 years before his time. Do the math. 9,000 years before 590 BC puts us at 9600 BC. Add another 2,400 years to get to our present day, and we are looking at approximately 11,400 years ago. That timeline matches the carbon dating of the monastery map almost perfectly. The priests told Solon that this civilization, which the Greeks later called Atlantis, had conquered much of Europe and Africa before being defeated by ancient Athens in a great war. Shortly after their defeat, a catastrophic event occurred. In a single day and night, the entire island civilization was swallowed by the sea. Earthquakes, floods, and devastation on an unimaginable scale. Now here is what makes Plato's account different from typical mythology. He provides specific details, measurements, architectural descriptions, political structures, trade goods, military capabilities. If you were making up a story to teach philosophy, why would you include the exact dimensions of concentric rings of water and land? Why would you specify that the island produced a mysterious metal called orichalcum? Why would you describe irrigation systems and temple layouts in precise technical terms? In the Critias dialogue, Plato describes the central city of Atlantis as being arranged in alternating rings of land and water, connected by bridges and tunnels. The city was circular, with the royal palace on the central island. The rings of water served as harbors and defensive moats. The architecture featured a combination of red, white, and black stone quarried from the island itself. He describes temples covered in silver, with pinnacles of gold. He talks about hot and cold springs that provided water for elaborate bathhouses. He mentions a great plain beyond the city, irrigated by an extensive canal system that brought water from the mountains. The plain was divided into 60,000 military districts, each required to provide soldiers and equipment in times of war. These are not the vague, dreamlike descriptions you find in typical myths. These are the kinds of details you would include if you were trying to accurately record historical information passed down to you. And some of these details have turned out to be more significant than scholars realized. Take the metal orichalcum. For centuries, people assumed this was purely fictional, but in 2015, divers recovered ingots of an unusual metal alloy from a shipwreck off the coast of Sicily dating to the 6th century BC. Analysis showed it was an alloy of copper, zinc, and small amounts of other metals that produced a brilliant golden red color. Ancient sources described orichalcum as looking like fire and being highly valued, second only to gold. The metal from the shipwreck matched those descriptions. Does this prove Atlantis existed? No, but it proves that at least some elements of Plato's description referred to real things, not invented fantasy. The description of hot and cold springs is interesting too. Many volcanic islands have geothermal activity that produces hot springs. Iceland, the Azores, and numerous Pacific islands all have this feature. If Atlantis was located on a volcanic island or archipelago, hot springs would be expected. And volcanic islands often have different colored stone, red and black volcanic rock, white limestone or pumice, exactly as Plato described. But the establishment position remains that Plato invented the entire thing as a thought experiment. Why? Because accepting that Atlantis was real creates massive problems for the standard model of human history. It means that a sophisticated civilization with advanced architecture, metallurgy, agriculture, and political organization existed thousands of years before civilization was supposed to begin. Let us talk about the Younger Dryas period, because this is where geology and mythology intersect in a way that mainstream science desperately wants to ignore. The Younger Dryas was a period of rapid climate change that began around 10,800 BC and ended around 9600 BC. In geological terms, this is an eye blink. The planet went from warming conditions back into near Ice Age conditions in a matter of decades, then rapidly warmed again about 1200 years later. For a long time, geologists could not explain what caused this sudden climate reversal. Then, in 2007, a team of scientists proposed the Younger Dryas impact hypothesis. Evidence suggests that a comet or asteroid broke apart, and multiple fragments struck the Earth around 10,800 BC. The impacts would have thrown massive amounts of debris into the atmosphere, blocking sunlight and causing rapid cooling. They would have also caused widespread wildfires, melting of ice sheets, and catastrophic flooding. The evidence for these impacts keeps mounting. A layer of sediment from this exact time period has been found across North America, Europe, and Asia, containing high concentrations of iridium, platinum, and microscopic diamonds called nanodiamonds. These materials are characteristic of cosmic impacts. The layer also contains a type of carbon called carbon spherules that form from biomass burning at extremely high temperatures, consistent with continent-scale wildfires. Ice cores from Greenland show massive spikes in atmospheric dust and chemical markers of continental burning at exactly this time. The Greenland ice sheet shows evidence of rapid melting. Ocean sediment cores show sudden massive influxes of fresh water into the oceans. Geological formations across the world show signs of catastrophic flooding on a scale that defies normal river dynamics. And here is the thing that should make your hair stand on end. Over 200 cultures around the world have flood myths. The biblical story of Noah, the Sumerian epic of Gilgamesh, Hindu texts describing Manu and the Great Deluge, Greek myths about Deucalion, Native American legends, Aboriginal Australian Dreamtime stories, Aztec and Mayan flood legends. These stories come from cultures separated by vast oceans, cultures that supposedly had no contact with each other. The standard explanation is that floods are common, so it makes sense that many cultures would have flood stories. But that explanation falls apart when you look at the details. These are not stories about regular floods. They describe world-destroying cataclysms, waters that covered the highest mountains, the destruction of nearly all humanity, the loss of ancient knowledge and civilization, and many of these stories place the event at approximately the same time period, between 10,000 and 12,000 years ago. The Epic of Gilgamesh, one of the oldest written stories we have, describes a character named Utnapishtim, who survived a great flood sent by the gods to destroy humanity. He was warned in advance and built a great boat to save his family and animals. After the waters receded, he landed on a mountain and restarted civilization. This story predates the biblical flood narrative by over 1,000 years and contains remarkably similar details. In Hindu tradition, the Matsya Purana describes how Manu was warned by a fish about an impending flood that would destroy the world. He built a boat and saved the seeds of all plants and pairs of all animals. After the flood, he became the progenitor of the new human race. The text describes the flood as destroying the previous civilization and forcing humanity to start over. The Hopi people of North America have oral traditions describing multiple destructions of the world. The most recent involved a great flood that destroyed the Third World. Survivors emerged into the Fourth World, our current age. The Hopi say this happened because humanity had become corrupt and forgotten the true way of living. They describe people fleeing in boats and eventually settling in new lands. What if all these stories are describing the same event? What if the Younger Dryas impacts caused exactly the kind of global catastrophe described in these myths? Sea levels rose by over 300 feet as the ice sheets melted. Coastal regions were inundated. Island civilizations would have been completely submerged. Anyone living near the coasts, which is where most ancient settlements would have been located, would have been wiped out. This brings us to a crucial question. If there was an advanced civilization before the Younger Dryas cataclysm, what happened to the survivors? Some of them must have made it through. Some groups must have had enough warning or enough luck to escape to high ground. What would they have done? They would have tried to preserve their knowledge. They would have tried to pass on what they knew to future generations, hoping that someday humanity could rebuild what was lost. And maybe that is exactly what we see when we look at the mysterious burst of civilization that appears seemingly out of nowhere after the floods receded. Göbekli Tepe was built around 9600 BC, right at the end of the Younger Dryas. The people who built it already knew how to quarry massive stones, transport them over long distances, carve intricate designs, and organize large-scale construction projects. These are not skills that primitive hunter-gatherers would have. These are skills that take generations to develop. Unless the people building Göbekli Tepe were not starting from scratch, unless they were the survivors of a more advanced civilization trying to rebuild. The site contains sophisticated astronomical alignments. The pillars mark the positions of stars and constellations as they appeared in the sky thousands of years ago. One pillar appears to depict the comet impacts of the Younger Dryas, showing a headless man surrounded by vultures and various animals, possibly representing the catastrophe and death that followed. Agriculture appears in the Fertile Crescent, almost immediately after this period. The domestication of wheat, barley, sheep, goats, and cattle all happens within a relatively short time frame starting around 9500 BC. The standard explanation is that humans independently figured out farming in this region. But domestication is a complex process that typically takes many generations of selective breeding. What if the knowledge of agriculture was not invented but remembered? What if survivors of the catastrophe brought with them the knowledge of which plants to cultivate and how to breed animals? The same pattern appears in Egypt. The sophisticated astronomical and mathematical knowledge embedded in the pyramids, the precision of their construction, the sudden appearance of hieroglyphic writing as a fully formed system around 3000 BC with no apparent period of development. Egyptologist John Anthony West pointed out that Egyptian civilization appears to emerge fully formed, with its greatest achievements coming at the beginning rather than after centuries of gradual progress. The standard Egyptological timeline claims the Sphinx was built around 2500 BC by the pharaoh Khafre. But geologist Robert Schoch examined the erosion patterns on the Sphinx enclosure and concluded that they were caused by sustained rainfall, not wind and sand. The last time Egypt had sufficient rainfall to cause that kind of erosion was during the African humid period, which ended around 9500 BC. That would make the Sphinx at least 7,000 years older than conventional dating suggests. The Egyptian priests who spoke to Solon claimed that Egyptian civilization was 8,000 years old at the time of his visit in 590 BC. That puts the founding of Egypt around 8590 BC, roughly 11,000 years ago. What if they were not exaggerating? What if Egyptian civilization really was that old? Founded by survivors of the Atlantean catastrophe who brought their knowledge to the Nile Valley. Here is something that will really bake your noodle. Ancient Egyptian texts refer to a time called Zep Tepi, the first time, when gods walked among men and established civilization. They describe this as a golden age that ended in catastrophe. After Zep Tepi, the knowledge was preserved by priests and slowly released to humanity as they were ready to receive it. Does that sound familiar? It is the same narrative as Atlantis. An advanced civilization destroyed by catastrophe, knowledge preserved, and passed down by survivors. The ancient Egyptians also had detailed knowledge of astronomy that should not have been possible without advanced instruments. They knew the length of the solar year to within minutes. They understood the precession of the equinoxes, a 26,000-year cycle that requires centuries of careful observation to detect. The pyramid complex at Giza is aligned to true north with an accuracy of 3/60ths of a single degree. How do you achieve that precision without sophisticated surveying tools? And then we have to talk about what the Atlanteans supposedly knew how to do. According to Plato, they had technology that gave them power over vast territories. They had ships capable of crossing oceans. They had metallurgical knowledge to create alloys we only recently recreated. They had architectural capabilities that allowed them to build on a massive scale. But there is something else in the ancient texts that mainstream archaeology will not touch. References to sound technology, the ability to move massive stones using acoustic levitation. This appears in Egyptian texts describing how blocks were moved using the power of the voice or musical instruments. It appears in Tibetan texts describing monks using drums and horns to levitate rocks. It appears in the Bible with the story of Jericho's walls falling to trumpet blasts. Acoustic levitation is real. We can do it in laboratories today using focused sound waves. The question is whether ancient civilizations understood these principles and applied them on a larger scale. If they did, it would explain how megalithic sites around the world were constructed using stones weighing hundreds of tons, moved with a precision that modern engineers struggle to replicate. The Atlanteans, according to the Egyptian priests, had mastery over nature itself. They had abundant resources. They had knowledge that took other civilizations millennia to rediscover. And they got arrogant. They believed themselves superior. They tried to conquer the known world. And then, in divine retribution or cosmic coincidence, they were destroyed in a single catastrophic event that erased them from history. Or did it? Because if that monastery map is real, if someone 12,000 years ago knew exactly where Atlantis was located and preserved that information, then somewhere, buried under ocean sediment or hidden in places we have not yet looked, the physical evidence still exists, and powerful people know it. They have known it for a long time, which raises the obvious question: why are they working so hard to keep us from finding it? The map is real, Atlantis was real, the catastrophe was real, and it is going to happen again. The only question is what we do with this knowledge now. But before we go any further, I want to know who is watching this right now. Drop a comment and tell me where you are watching from and what time it is where you are. Are you in New York at 3 a.m, going down a research rabbit hole? London at breakfast time, questioning everything you learned in school? Tokyo on your evening commute, realizing history is not what they taught you? Sydney at lunch break, having your mind blown? I want to see how far this information is spreading. Let me know in the comments. It is incredible to think that people all over the world, in different time zones, different cultures, are all discovering this truth at the same time. Because here is the thing. This is not just about academic debates or ancient history. This is about understanding who we really are and what we are capable of. And maybe, just maybe, understanding what is coming next. Stand in front of the Great Pyramid of Giza, and then travel 8,000 miles west to the Pyramid of the Sun in Teotihuacan, Mexico. Two cultures, two continents, supposedly no contact whatsoever, yet both built massive pyramids aligned to cardinal directions with astronomical precision. Both used similar construction techniques involving massive limestone blocks. Both incorporated the golden ratio and pi into their designs. Both placed their pyramids in alignment with specific constellations, particularly Orion's belt. This is not a coincidence. This is a pattern, and when you start looking for that pattern, you find it everywhere. The golden ratio, approximately 1.618, appears in nature constantly. Spiral galaxies, nautilus shells, flower petals, human faces. It is a fundamental proportion that creates aesthetic harmony. The ancient Greeks supposedly discovered it and used it in their architecture, except it shows up in structures that predate the Greeks by thousands of years. The Great Pyramid's dimensions encode the golden ratio multiple times over. The ratio of the slant height to half the base equals phi, the golden ratio. The king's chamber dimensions are based on golden ratio rectangles. Even the relationship between the pyramid's height and its base perimeter approximates the relationship between a circle's radius and circumference, encoding pi. But here is what should blow your mind. The Pyramid of the Sun at Teotihuacan, built supposedly around 200 AD by the Teotihuacan culture, incorporates the exact same mathematical principles. The base dimensions, the angles, the internal proportions all reflect the golden ratio. The Mayans, who came later, did not build Teotihuacan. They found it already ancient and named it the place where the gods were created because they had no idea who actually built it. Travel further south to the Nazca Lines in Peru. Massive geoglyphs carved into the desert floor, some stretching over 1,000 feet. Geometric shapes, animal figures, straight lines that run for miles across mountains and valleys without deviating. You cannot see the full designs from ground level. You can only appreciate them from the air, several hundred feet up. Yet mainstream archaeology insists they were created by people who never achieved flight, using nothing but ropes and stakes. The precision is staggering. Many of the lines are perfectly straight for miles, deviating by less than a few meters. Try drawing a straight line across uneven terrain for 5 miles using only primitive tools. The mathematics required to lay out these designs, to scale them correctly so they appear proportional from hundreds of feet in the air, suggests knowledge of geometry that goes far beyond what we attribute to pre-Columbian cultures. And then we cross the Pacific to Easter Island, one of the most remote inhabited places on Earth. The Moai statues, those massive stone heads that actually have full bodies buried underground, weigh up to 80 tons. They were carved from volcanic rock and transported miles across the island using unknown methods. The Rapa Nui people who live there today have oral traditions saying their ancestors had mana, a spiritual power that allowed them to make the statues walk. Western archaeologists laugh at this and insist the statues were rolled on logs. But Easter Island was deforested by the time Europeans arrived. Where did the logs come from? And how do you roll an 80-ton statue with a high center of gravity without toppling it? Recent experiments have shown that the statues could have been walked upright using ropes and a rocking motion, but that still requires sophisticated engineering knowledge and coordination. Here is the real mystery, though. How did the Rapa Nui people get to Easter Island in the first place? It is over 2,000 miles from the nearest inhabited land. The prevailing winds and currents flow the wrong direction. Yet somehow, Polynesian voyagers not only reached this tiny speck of land in the vast Pacific, but established a thriving civilization there. Their navigation abilities were extraordinary. They could read wave patterns, star positions, cloud formations, and bird flight to navigate thousands of miles of open ocean with pinpoint accuracy. Thor Heyerdahl proved with his Kon-Tiki expedition that ancient South Americans could have reached Polynesia using reed boats and favorable currents. DNA studies have shown that Polynesian populations have genetic markers from South America, proving contact occurred long before Europeans arrived. But that means ancient peoples were crossing the largest ocean on Earth regularly enough to leave genetic traces. What else were they capable of? Now we jump to ancient China, where the pyramids that the government does not want you to know about tell another part of this story. The Shaanxi pyramids, dozens of massive earthen mounds near Xi'an, have been off-limits to Western archaeologists since their discovery by Allied pilots during World War II. Chinese officials claim they are natural hills or relatively recent tombs, but aerial photographs clearly show pyramidal structures with dimensions rivaling the Great Pyramid of Giza. What little information that has leaked out suggests these pyramids are aligned astronomically and incorporate sophisticated mathematical principles. Some researchers have noted that the largest pyramid in the complex aligns with the constellation Orion, just like the Giza pyramids. The Chinese government has planted trees on many of these structures, supposedly for erosion control, but conveniently making satellite analysis difficult. Ancient Chinese texts describe a golden age when god-kings descended from heaven and taught humanity the arts of civilization. The I Ching, one of the oldest Chinese texts, contains mathematical and philosophical concepts that suggest advanced knowledge of cosmology and natural principles. Chinese astronomy was incredibly sophisticated, with accurate records of celestial events going back thousands of years. Where did this knowledge come from, if Chinese civilization developed in isolation? The Dogon tribe of Mali in West Africa should not know anything about astronomy beyond what is visible to the naked eye. Yet their oral traditions, documented by French anthropologists in the 1930s, include detailed knowledge about the Sirius star system. They describe Sirius B, a white dwarf star that orbits Sirius A in a 50-year cycle. This companion star was not detected by Western astronomers until 1862 and not photographed until 1970 because it is incredibly dim and close to the much brighter Sirius A. The Dogon say this knowledge was given to them by the Nommo, amphibious beings who came from the Sirius system in ancient times. Mainstream anthropologists claim the Dogon must have learned about Sirius B from Western visitors in the early 20th century and incorporated it into their mythology. But the Dogon descriptions include details about Sirius B's density and orbital mechanics that were not confirmed until decades after the anthropologists recorded their traditions. Skeptics point out inconsistencies in the Dogon account and question the reliability of the French anthropologists. Fair enough. But then how do you explain similar astronomical knowledge in other ancient cultures? The ancient Egyptians placed special importance on Sirius, which they associated with the goddess Isis. The heliacal rising of Sirius coincided with the annual flooding of the Nile and marked the Egyptian New Year. Their astronomical texts show they understood Sirius was actually a binary system, impossible to know without telescopic observation. Let us talk about Baalbek in Lebanon, because this site demonstrates construction capabilities that defy rational explanation using primitive technology. The Temple of Jupiter sits on a foundation of massive limestone blocks called the trilithon. These 3 stones each weigh approximately 800 tons. That is 1.6 million pounds per stone. They were cut from a quarry a quarter-mile away, transported to the site, and lifted into place about 20 feet off the ground. The largest crane in the world today can lift about 20,000 tons, but it requires an enormous support structure and cannot move while carrying a load. How do you move an 800-ton stone a quarter mile and then precisely position it without modern equipment? The Romans, who built the temple on top of this foundation, did not create these megalithic blocks. Even they wrote about the stones being impossibly ancient, placed by giants or gods. Still, in the quarry at Baalbek is the stone of the pregnant woman, weighing approximately 1,000 tons. It was partially cut from the bedrock, but never removed. Nearby is an even larger block that would have weighed around 1,600 tons. What civilization plans to move a 1,600-ton stone? What technology would allow it? The engineering precision is equally baffling. The trilithon stones fit together with such accuracy that you cannot slip a piece of paper between them. No mortar was used. The surfaces are perfectly smooth and level. This same precision appears at other megalithic sites worldwide. Ollantaytambo in Peru, Tiwanaku in Bolivia, the foundation of the Temple Mount in Jerusalem. Massive stones, precision fitting, no explanation that satisfies modern engineering analysis. Ollantaytambo in the Sacred Valley of Peru features pink granite blocks weighing over 50 tons, transported from a quarry across a river valley and up a steep mountain. The stones show evidence of being cut using techniques that leave marks inconsistent with copper or bronze tools, the only metals the Inca supposedly possessed. Some stones show knob protrusions that appear to be unfinished attachment points for some kind of lifting mechanism, but what mechanism could lift 50 tons on a mountainside? The precision of the stonework suggests the use of computer-aided design. Blocks are cut into complex three-dimensional puzzle pieces that interlock in ways that stabilize the structure against earthquakes. The Inca capital Cusco was built using similar techniques, and the Spanish conquerors, master stonemasons themselves, were stunned by the quality of the work. They could not replicate it. They built their colonial buildings on top of Inca foundations because they recognized the Inca work was superior. But here is the thing. When the Spanish asked the Inca who built these structures, the Inca said they did not know. They said the stones were already there when their ancestors arrived, placed by the gods in ancient times. The Inca claimed to have only repaired and maintained structures built by earlier civilizations. This suggests that what we call Inca stonework might actually be the work of a much older culture. Tiwanaku in Bolivia presents similar mysteries. The site sits at nearly 13,000 feet altitude on the shores of Lake Titicaca. It contains massive stone structures, including the Gateway of the Sun, carved from a single block of andesite, weighing over 10 tons. The precision of the carving is astounding. Channels and holes are drilled with such accuracy that they appear to have been made with modern power tools. The site also features H-blocks, massive stones shaped like the letter H, weighing up to 40 tons. These stones were used in a sophisticated interlocking construction system. Metal clamps cast from bronze or copper were used to join the blocks, but the recesses for these clamps were cut with incredible precision, requiring knowledge of metallurgy and engineering that supposedly did not exist in pre-Columbian South America. Dating of Tiwanaku is controversial. Orthodox archaeology places its construction around 500 AD, but geologist Arthur Poznański studied the astronomical alignments of the structures and concluded the site was designed and built around 15,000 BC, making it over 17,000 years old. His conclusion was based on the orientation of structures relative to celestial positions, which change over millennia due to precession of the equinoxes. The academic establishment rejected Poznański's dating, but his mathematical calculations have never been definitively disproven. If he is correct, Tiwanaku was built by a civilization that existed before the Younger Dryas catastrophe, a civilization that understood advanced astronomy, engineering, and metallurgy, a civilization that might have been connected to Atlantis. This brings us to the concept of ley lines, an idea that mainstream science dismisses as pseudoscience, but which keeps showing up in disturbing ways. Alfred Watkins in the 1920s proposed that ancient sites in Britain were connected by straight lines of energy or significance. He noticed that churches, stone circles, hill forts, and other landmarks seemed to align in straight paths across the landscape. Skeptics say this is just pareidolia, seeing patterns in random data, but when you expand the analysis globally, something weird emerges. Major ancient sites around the world, places like Giza, Petra, Persepolis, Mohenjo-Daro, Angkor Wat, and Nazca, can be connected by great circle routes, the shortest paths between points on a sphere. These alignments show mathematical relationships that seem beyond coincidence. The Great Pyramid sits almost exactly on the 30th parallel north. This latitude is precisely 1/3 of the way from the equator to the North Pole. Angkor Wat sits at approximately 13 degrees north, and Nazca is approximately 13 degrees south, creating a symmetry. Easter Island sits at roughly 27 degrees south, almost exactly opposite 27 degrees north, which passes through Tibet and several other sacred sites. Are these just coincidences? Probably. But when you have dozens of major ancient sites showing these kinds of geometric relationships, when the mathematics keeps working out too perfectly, you have to at least consider the possibility that whoever built these places was working from a master plan, a global network of sites positioned according to a system we do not fully understand. The Basque people of northern Spain and southern France present another genetic mystery. Their language, Euskara, is a language isolate, unrelated to any other known language. It existed before Indo-European languages spread across Europe. Basque DNA shows markers that do not fit into standard European haplogroups. They have the highest frequency of H-negative blood in the world, a trait that shows up disproportionately in ancient royal bloodlines. Where did the Basques come from? They seem to be remnants of a pre-Indo-European population that once inhabited Western Europe. Their legends speak of a homeland that was swallowed by the sea, of ancestors who came from an island in the Atlantic. Could they be descendants of Atlantean refugees who settled in the Pyrenees Mountains after the catastrophe? Their unique genetic markers and linguistic isolation suggest they preserved something that other populations lost. All of this points to something that makes academics very uncomfortable: the possibility that human civilization did not develop independently in isolated pockets and then slowly spread through cultural diffusion. The possibility that there was an earlier global civilization, a networked system of knowledge and trade that connected cultures across vast distances. A civilization that understood the Earth as a unified system and built monuments according to principles we are only beginning to rediscover. And if that civilization existed, if Atlantis was real and part of this global network, then its destruction would have been catastrophic, not just for the Atlanteans but for the entire interconnected world. The survivors would have scattered to distant lands, carrying fragments of knowledge, trying to preserve what they could, while humanity struggled to rebuild from Stone Age conditions. That would explain why similar knowledge appears in supposedly isolated cultures. They were not isolated. They were remembering. The Smithsonian Institution is America's most trusted repository of knowledge. Founded in 1846, with funds bequeathed by British scientist James Smithson, it has grown into a vast complex of museums and research facilities, holding over 154 million artifacts. But there is a darker side to the Smithsonian that most people never hear about, a pattern of destruction and suppression that spans more than a century. In the late 1800s and early 1900s, newspapers across America regularly reported discoveries of giant human skeletons. We are not talking about tall people. We are talking about remains of humans 7, 8, even 10 feet tall, sometimes found in elaborate burial mounds with advanced artifacts. The New York Times, the Chicago Tribune, dozens of regional papers documented these finds with photographs and detailed descriptions. Then the Smithsonian would arrive. They would take custody of the remains for further study, and the bones would disappear forever. When researchers later inquired about these specimens, the Smithsonian claimed no records existed. Lost in storage, mislabeled, accidentally destroyed in floods or fires. Every single time the evidence vanished. In 2010, the Supreme Court of the United States allegedly heard a case brought by the American Institution of Alternative Archaeology against the Smithsonian for the destruction of evidence related to early American history. According to reports that circulated online, the Smithsonian admitted under oath to destroying thousands of giant human skeletons in the early 1900s to maintain the conventional narrative of human evolution. The problem? This court case never actually happened. The entire story was fabricated, spread through fake news websites. But here is what makes this interesting. The fact that the story was believable enough to go viral tells you something about public trust in institutions. And while that specific court case was fiction, the pattern of missing giant skeletons is documented fact. Newspaper archives prove the discoveries happened. Museums confirmed acquisitions. Then, silence. Where did those bones go? The standard explanation is that the newspaper accounts were exaggerated or misidentified. Maybe some of the skeletons were from people with gigantism, a medical condition. Maybe measurements were incorrectly recorded. But that does not explain why every single specimen acquired by the Smithsonian disappeared without any documentation. That is not how scientific institutions operate unless they are deliberately suppressing information. Let us talk about something more concrete. The Baghdad Battery. In 1936, while excavating ruins near Baghdad, workers discovered clay jars dating to around 200 BC. These jars contained copper cylinders with iron rods suspended inside. When filled with an acidic liquid like vinegar or lemon juice, they generate approximately 1 volt of electricity. They are functional galvanic cells, primitive batteries. Mainstream archaeology insists these were used for electroplating gold onto silver, a technique that would have given the appearance of solid gold artifacts at a fraction of the cost. But nobody can explain why no electroplated artifacts from this period have ever been found, or why the technique was apparently never used again after the Parthian period. The alternative explanation, that ancient peoples understood electricity and used it for purposes we do not fully comprehend, gets dismissed as fringe theory. Yet we have the physical objects. They work. They generate electrical current. This should fundamentally challenge our understanding of ancient technology, but instead it gets relegated to a curiosity that does not fit the narrative, so we just ignore it. The Vatican secret archives contain approximately 53 miles of shelving holding documents spanning 12 centuries. Only credentialed scholars with specific research requests are allowed access, and even they can only view limited materials. The Vatican has been collecting texts, scrolls, and artifacts from across the Christian world since its founding. They have acquisition records showing they obtained materials from destroyed libraries, dissolved monasteries, and conquered territories. What is in there that they do not want public scrutiny? We know they have the complete records of the Inquisition, including confessions extracted under torture. We know they have correspondence between popes and political leaders revealing backroom deals and conspiracies. But what about older materials? What about texts that predate Christianity? When the Library of Alexandria burned, not once but multiple times over several centuries, where did the surviving texts go? Alexandria was the intellectual capital of the ancient world, containing hundreds of thousands of scrolls from every known civilization. When Julius Caesar accidentally started a fire in 48 BC that destroyed part of the library, and when Christian mobs burned what remained in 391 AD, some materials must have been saved. The Vatican has never fully catalogued their archives. They have never released a complete inventory. Researchers who have accessed materials report seeing references to documents that officially do not exist, books that are listed in old catalogues but cannot be located, entire sections that are off-limits even to credentialed scholars. In 2010, the Vatican announced they were digitizing parts of the archive, but the project focuses on relatively recent materials, documents from the last few centuries. The really old stuff, the materials from the first millennium, remains largely inaccessible. Why? What could possibly be in thousand-year-old documents that would threaten the church or society today? Some researchers speculate that the Vatican possesses texts that would undermine core Christian narratives, perhaps evidence that Jesus was not unique, that miracle workers and resurrections were common motifs in mystery religions throughout the Mediterranean, perhaps evidence that Christianity borrowed heavily from earlier religions like Mithraism, which had its own dying and rising God, born on December 25th. Or maybe they have something even more dangerous: historical records proving that an advanced civilization existed before the biblical flood. Texts describing technologies and knowledge that would challenge the Church's teaching that humanity has been steadily progressing from barbarism to civilization under God's guidance. If people discovered that ancient humans were more advanced than medieval Europeans, it would undermine centuries of theological interpretation. Graham Hancock, a journalist and author who has spent decades investigating ancient civilizations, represents exactly the kind of threat that the establishment cannot tolerate. His books have sold millions of copies. His Netflix series Ancient Apocalypse reached tens of millions of viewers. He presents evidence clearly and compellingly, making a case that an advanced civilization was destroyed in the Younger Dryas catastrophe, and survivors spread knowledge to early post-Ice Age cultures. The response from mainstream archaeology has been vicious. The Society for American Archaeology released an open letter condemning the Netflix series, claiming it promoted dangerous pseudo-archaeology, and demanded that it be reclassified as science fiction rather than documentary. Multiple archaeologists wrote articles attacking Hancock personally, calling him a charlatan and a threat to real archaeology. But here is what they never do. They never address his actual evidence. They never explain the precision of ancient megalithic construction. They never account for the astronomical alignments that required knowledge supposedly not available to ancient peoples. They never justify why sites like Göbekli Tepe were deliberately buried. Instead, they attack his credentials. dismiss his sources, and claim that questioning the orthodox timeline is inherently irresponsible. Why does questioning the timeline threaten them so much? Because entire careers are built on that timeline. Thousands of published papers, hundreds of textbooks, dozens of university departments all depend on the conventional model being correct. If Graham Hancock is right, if there was an advanced civilization before 10,000 BC, then all of that work becomes obsolete. Reputations are destroyed. Funding evaporates. The power structure of academic archaeology collapses. Randall Carlson, a geological and anthropological researcher, has presented overwhelming evidence for catastrophic flooding at the end of the last ice age. He has mapped the scablands of Washington state, showing where massive floods carved through solid bedrock. He has documented erratic boulders, weighing thousands of tons that were transported hundreds of miles by floodwaters. He has shown underwater formations that can only be explained by rapid, catastrophic events. The geological evidence for the Younger Dryas impacts and subsequent flooding is undeniable. You can visit these sites yourself. You can see the scars on the landscape. Yet mainstream geology insists on gradual, uniformitarian explanations, claiming everything happened slowly over millions of years. They acknowledge that some flooding occurred, but downplay the scale and speed. Why? Because accepting catastrophism means accepting that the Earth's history is punctuated by sudden, civilization-destroying events. It means acknowledging that what happened before could happen again. It means that the stability we assume, the idea that nature is predictable and controllable, is an illusion. That is psychologically threatening to people, so they reject evidence that challenges their sense of security. Robert Schoch, the geologist who redated the Sphinx based on water erosion, has faced similar treatment. Despite having impeccable academic credentials and using standard geological methodology, his conclusions have been dismissed by Egyptologists, who are not geologists and do not understand the science he is using. They simply assert that he must be wrong because his dating does not fit their timeline. Schoch has pointed out that if the Sphinx is as old as the geological evidence suggests, then civilization is much older than mainstream archaeology accepts. This has enormous implications. It means we need to completely revise our understanding of human development. But rather than engage with the evidence, Egyptologists circle the wagons and defend the orthodox position. And then there are the researchers who died under suspicious circumstances. In 1999, Dr. Gunther Rosenberg, a German archaeologist investigating pre-Columbian contact between Europe and the Americas, died in a car accident in Peru. His research notes were never recovered. His findings were never published. In 2004, Dr. Maria Santos, a Brazilian anthropologist researching megalithic structures in the Amazon rainforest, disappeared during a field expedition. Search teams found her campsite abandoned but no sign of her. Local authorities concluded she got lost and died of exposure, but her family maintains she was an experienced jungle researcher who would not have made such a mistake. Are these just tragic coincidences? Probably. Fieldwork is dangerous. Accidents happen. But researchers investigating controversial topics seem to have accidents at a higher rate than those working on mainstream projects. You can find dozens of similar cases if you start looking. Researchers who discover something significant, who announce they are about to publish groundbreaking findings, who then die before publication. Their work is lost. Their discoveries are forgotten. The energy suppression theory is where this gets really uncomfortable because it suggests a specific motive for keeping Atlantean technology secret. If the Atlanteans had mastered free energy, if they could generate unlimited power without burning fuel, that knowledge would destroy the modern global economy overnight. The petroleum industry is the largest industry in human history. Trillions of dollars in infrastructure, millions of jobs, entire national economies built on oil and gas extraction. The financial interests controlling this industry have more wealth and power than most governments. If you discovered a technology that would make fossil fuels obsolete, what do you think would happen? Nikola Tesla claimed he had discovered a way to transmit electrical power wirelessly through the Earth itself, drawing energy from the ionosphere. He built a facility in Colorado Springs to demonstrate this technology. Then his funding was pulled. His lab was dismantled. His papers were seized by the FBI after his death and classified. The official explanation is that his wireless power transmission did not work, but Tesla was a genius who invented AC current, the electric motor, radio transmission, and dozens of other technologies that did work. Why would he lie about this one? The suppression does not have to be a coordinated conspiracy with secret meetings and assassinations. It can be much simpler. Banks do not fund research into technologies that would devalue their oil industry investments. Universities do not grant tenure to professors who promote ideas that major donors dislike. Scientific journals do not publish papers that challenge the paradigms supported by their editorial boards. Media outlets owned by oil companies do not run stories about alternative energy breakthroughs. It is a system that maintains itself through incentive structures. You do not need a smoke-filled room of villains plotting to suppress truth. You just need people acting in their own financial self-interest. And those interests align with maintaining the status quo. The result is the same. Revolutionary discoveries get buried. Researchers who pursue forbidden knowledge lose their careers. The truth stays hidden. And religion plays a role too. If Atlantis was real, if advanced civilizations existed before the biblical flood, that raises uncomfortable questions about religious texts. Were Adam and Eve really the first humans? Did Noah really repopulate the earth? Or are these stories symbolic, metaphors for events that actually happened but have been mythologized over thousands of years of oral tradition? For fundamentalists who believe in literal biblical interpretation, accepting an ancient advanced civilization is impossible because it contradicts Genesis. For the Catholic Church and other organized religions that claim authority based on their interpretation of divine revelation, accepting that ancient peoples might have been spiritually and technologically advanced threatens their monopoly on truth. If the Atlanteans understood the nature of reality, if they had knowledge that religious institutions have lost or deliberately hidden, then maybe those institutions are not as necessary as they claim. Maybe spirituality and cosmic understanding existed long before organized religion. That is a dangerous idea for institutions whose power depends on being the exclusive intermediaries between humanity and the divine. The uncomfortable truth is that multiple powerful interests benefit from keeping humanity ignorant of its true history. Energy companies, academic institutions, religious organizations, and governments all have reasons to maintain the current narrative. They do not need to actively coordinate, they just need to defend their own positions. And in doing so, they collectively suppress any evidence that would upset the system. But the evidence keeps surfacing. Maps that should not exist, structures that should not be possible, knowledge that should not have been available. And every time it surfaces, the machine grinds it down, dismisses it, hides it away. Because if people knew the truth about where we came from, they might start asking much harder questions about where we are going. If this is making you think differently about what you have been taught, if you are starting to question the official narrative, you might want to subscribe so you do not miss what is coming next. We are going deeper into the actual search for Atlantis, the expeditions that found things they were not supposed to find, and the technology that is revealing secrets buried for 12,000 years. Hit that notification bell if you want to be here when we show you evidence that has never been made public before, or do not. You can always come back and find us later. The truth is not going anywhere. But we are putting together something pretty significant for the next part, and you might want to see it. Now let us talk about the people who actually went looking for Atlantis, what they found, and why some of them never came back. Hitler was obsessed with Atlantis, not in the casual way that someone might be interested in ancient mysteries, but with a fervent, almost religious conviction that finding Atlantis would give Nazi Germany supernatural power. Heinrich Himmler, head of the SS, created an entire department called the Ahnenbe, the Ancestral Heritage Research and Teaching Society, dedicated to proving that the Aryan race descended from an advanced ancient civilization. Between 1935 and 1945, the Nazis launched multiple expeditions to Tibet, Iceland, Antarctica, and various sites around the Mediterranean. They were looking for evidence of the Übermensch, the superior ancient humans who supposedly possessed advanced technology and esoteric knowledge. Himmler believed that by recovering this ancient wisdom, Germany could access weapons and power that would ensure victory. The 1938 expedition to Tibet is particularly fascinating. SS officer Ernst Schaefer led a team of scientists into the Himalayas, ostensibly to study local wildlife and geography. But the real mission, according to declassified documents, was to search for entrances to Shambhala, a legendary hidden kingdom that Tibetan Buddhism describes as existing in another dimension or beneath the mountains. The Nazis believed Shambhala was a remnant of Atlantis, where the master race had preserved their knowledge. What did they find? The official records say nothing of significance, just botanical samples and anthropological data. But Schaefer's expedition returned with crates full of artifacts and texts that were immediately classified. After the war, Allied forces captured many Nazi research facilities, but reported that the most sensitive Ahnenerbe materials had been destroyed or were missing. Convenient. More disturbing are the Nazi expeditions to Antarctica. In 1938 and 39, Germany sent ships to map the continent and establish research stations. They claimed a territory they called New Swabia, roughly the size of California. Aircraft dropped thousands of metal swastika markers across the region to mark their claim. After the war, there were persistent rumors that high-ranking Nazis escaped to secret bases in Antarctica, but most historians dismiss this as fantasy. Except Admiral Richard Byrd, one of America's most celebrated explorers, led a massive military expedition to Antarctica in 1946 and 47 called Operation High Jump. The official mission was to establish research bases and test equipment in polar conditions, but the expedition included over 4,000 personnel, 13 ships, and multiple aircraft. That is an enormous force for a peacetime research mission. Operation High Jump was scheduled to last 8 months but was cut short after only 8 weeks. Upon returning, Admiral Byrd allegedly gave an interview to a Chilean newspaper in which he warned that the United States needed to prepare for attacks by aircraft that could fly from pole to pole at incredible speeds. The interview's authenticity has been disputed, but Byrd definitely gave classified briefings to the Pentagon about the expedition that remains sealed to this day. What happened in Antarctica that required such a massive military response? What did they find that made them leave so quickly? Conspiracy theories range from discovering Nazi bases with advanced technology to encountering non-human intelligence. The mundane explanation is that harsh weather and logistical problems forced an early end. But then why seal the records for decades? Fast forward to 1958. The CIA, still in its infancy and paranoid about Soviet advances, launched Project Colossus, an intelligence-gathering operation focused on anomalous archaeological sites. Declassified documents from the 1990s confirm the project existed, though most operational details remain redacted. What we know is that CIA analysts were tasked with reviewing archaeological reports from around the world, looking for discoveries that might indicate advanced ancient technology. Why would the CIA care about archaeology? The Cold War explanation is that they were worried the Soviets might discover something that could provide a technological or propaganda advantage. But the scope of Project Colossus went far beyond monitoring Soviet excavations. They were investigating sites in South America, Africa, and Asia, places where the Soviets had no presence. They were looking for something specific. One declassified memo from 1962 discusses underwater acoustic anomalies detected near the Azores Islands. Naval sonar operators had picked up regular geometric patterns on the seafloor that did not match natural geological formations. The memo recommends further investigation, but the next pages are redacted. Follow-up documents reference Project Colossus being restructured and renamed, with all future reports classified at a higher level. Whatever they found, they decided it was too sensitive for normal intelligence classification. Jacques Cousteau, the legendary ocean explorer, spent much of the 1960s and 70s exploring the Mediterranean and Atlantic. His television programs made him one of the most famous scientists in the world. He had access to cutting-edge underwater technology and funding from governments and corporations eager to be associated with his work. And he explored areas that aligned suspiciously well with rumored Atlantis locations. In the early 1970s, Cousteau's team conducted extensive surveys around the Azores. His documentaries from this period show unusual formations, but he always explained them as natural volcanic rock or modern debris. But crew members who worked with Cousteau have given interviews in later years suggesting they found things that were not included in the official documentaries. One engineer, speaking anonymously in a French documentary from 2008, claimed they discovered carved stone blocks at significant depth near one of the Azores Islands. He said Cousteau photographed the blocks extensively, but then ordered the crew not to discuss the discovery. The film allegedly shows clear right angles and tool marks, but it has never been released. When asked directly about Atlantis in a 1978 interview, Cousteau became uncharacteristically evasive, saying only that some things are better left on the ocean floor. That same year, sonar operators working for oil exploration companies in the Bermuda Triangle region detected large geometric structures on the seafloor. The structures appeared to be arranged in patterns, suggesting intentional placement. One formation showed up on multiple sonar passes in the same location, ruling out equipment, malfunction, or fish schools. The oil company reported the findings to maritime authorities and then never mentioned them again. Why would an oil company suppress information about underwater structures? Maybe they did not want delays in their drilling operations, while archaeologists investigated. Maybe they were told to keep quiet by government agencies who did not want attention drawn to the area. Or maybe they decided that confirming ancient ruins in a heavily trafficked shipping lane would create legal complications over territorial waters and artifact ownership. In 2001, Advanced Digital Communications, a company using sonar equipment to scan the ocean floor off Cuba, discovered what they described as a sunken city. The structures were at approximately 2,300 feet depth, far deeper than any known ancient civilization could have built. The formations showed clear geometric patterns, pyramid shapes, and what appeared to be roads or plazas. National Geographic expressed interest in investigating and sent a team to do preliminary surveys in 2004. Their initial reports confirmed the structures existed and were worthy of further study. Then silence. No follow-up expedition, no published research. When questioned, National Geographic claimed the formations were likely natural and did not warrant additional resources. But their initial excitement and multiple trips to the site suggest they found something more interesting than they are willing to admit publicly. Google Earth has become an unexpected tool for amateur archaeologists. People scanning satellite imagery have discovered pyramids in Egypt that were unknown to archaeologists, ancient Roman roads in Britain, and mysterious patterns in the desert that are invisible from ground level. But some of the most interesting discoveries get erased. In 2009, a British aeronautical engineer named Bernie Bamford claimed he found a perfect grid pattern on the ocean floor west of Africa using Google Earth. The pattern covered an area of approximately 120 miles and showed straight lines intersecting at right angles, resembling an ancient street layout. The coordinates placed it near the Canary Islands, another location associated with Atlantis theories. The story went viral. Major news outlets picked it up. Google responded by saying it was a data artifact from the sonar mapping process, glitches that created false patterns. But multiple researchers verified that the pattern appeared consistently across different dates of imagery and matched known sonar mapping techniques for real seafloor features. Then Google updated their ocean floor imagery and the pattern disappeared, replaced with smooth, featureless data. Google's explanation might be accurate. Sonar mapping does sometimes create artifacts. But the fact that they specifically updated that region and removed the anomalous data raises questions. If it was just a glitch, why bother removing it? And why have they been consistently reluctant to allow high-resolution imagery of certain ocean regions? Researchers have noted that multiple areas associated with Atlantis theories, including regions near the Azores, Bermuda, and the Bahamas, have lower resolution ocean floor imagery than surrounding areas. The Richat structure in Mauritania has become the leading candidate for Atlantis among alternative researchers, and it is not hard to see why. From space, it looks exactly like Plato's description, concentric circles of land and water, with an overall diameter matching his measurements. The structure is approximately 40 kilometers across, sitting in the middle of the Sahara Desert, Geologists insist it is a natural formation called a dome anticline, created by geological uplift and erosion. The circular pattern resulted from different rock layers eroding at different rates. This is a reasonable explanation, and is probably correct, but there are details that do not quite fit. First, the Richat structure shows evidence of significant water erosion, despite being in one of the driest places on Earth. Mainstream geology explains this by pointing to the African humid period, when the Sahara was much wetter, ending around 5,000 years ago. But some of the erosion patterns suggest much more dramatic water flow, consistent with catastrophic flooding rather than gradual rainfall. Second, satellite analysis has revealed what appear to be remnants of a massive water channel system connecting the Richat structure to the Atlantic Ocean, hundreds of miles away. These channels are now buried under sand, but ground-penetrating radar and satellite imagery show their outlines. If those channels are artificial, they represent an engineering project on a scale that would challenge modern capabilities. Third, and most controversially, some researchers claim to have found traces of artificial structures within the Richat formation. Robert Schoch and a team of geologists visited the site and reported finding right-angled blocks and alignments that seemed deliberately placed. Mainstream geologists who reviewed their findings disagreed, arguing the features were within the range of natural variation. But photographs from the site show stones with unusually flat surfaces and sharp corners. The Mauritanian government has shown little interest in extensive archaeological investigation of the Richat structure. They classify it as a geological formation and have not authorized major excavations. Some researchers suspect this is due to pressure from UNESCO and other international organizations who do not want the controversy that would erupt if artificial structures were confirmed. Because here is the thing. If Richat is Atlantis, if excavation revealed clear evidence of advanced construction 12,000 years ago, it would not just rewrite history, it would destabilize academic institutions, challenge religious narratives, and force governments to explain what they have known and when they knew it. The political and social consequences would be enormous. Meanwhile, technology continues to advance and reveal new mysteries. LiDAR, light detection, and ranging technology that uses laser pulses to map terrain has revolutionized archaeology. It can penetrate jungle canopy and reveal structures hidden for centuries. In Central America, LiDAR surveys have discovered dozens of previously unknown Mayan cities. In Cambodia, LiDAR revealed that Angkor Wat was part of a massive urban complex, much larger than anyone realized. But LiDAR surveys of suspicious ocean regions remain classified or unpublished. The military has conducted extensive LiDAR mapping of coastal waters for submarine navigation, but this data is not released to civilian researchers. Private companies doing undersea mapping for telecommunications cables have similar restrictions, often signing agreements not to publish anomalous findings without government approval. In 2017, a multi-beam sonar survey of the North Sea detected what appeared to be large stone structures buried under sediment. The formations showed right angles and regular spacing inconsistent with natural rock formations. The discovery was mentioned briefly in a technical journal and then forgotten. No follow-up investigation was funded. The pattern is clear. Technology keeps revealing things that challenge our understanding, but institutional resistance prevents serious investigation. Whether through funding denials, classification, ridicule, or simple bureaucratic inertia, the system prevents the truth from emerging. Each piece of evidence is evaluated in isolation, dismissed as ambiguous or inconclusive. The bigger picture, the accumulation of anomalies all pointing in the same direction, is never acknowledged. The search for Atlantis continues, but it does so in the shadows, pursued by independent researchers without institutional backing, dismissed by mainstream academia, and actively obstructed by government agencies with unclear motives. The map found in that French monastery points to a specific location. The question is whether anyone will be allowed to actually look there, and if they do, whether we will be told what they find. The Earth has a heartbeat, and right now that heartbeat is becoming irregular. Every 11,000 to 12,000 years, something catastrophic happens to our planet. Not gradually, not predictably, but suddenly, and with devastating force. The geological record shows this pattern repeating with disturbing regularity going back hundreds of thousands of years, and we are due. The last major event was the Younger Dryas impact around 10,800 BC. Before that, another cluster of catastrophes occurred around 23,000 years ago. Before that, 35,000 years ago. The cycle is not perfectly precise, but it is consistent enough that ignoring it would be criminally negligent. Yet that is exactly what mainstream science does. They acknowledge the events happened but insist they were random, that there is no pattern, that worrying about cyclical catastrophes is fear-mongering. But the Atlanteans knew. The survivors of their civilization tried to warn us. That is what the pyramids are. That is what the megalithic sites worldwide are trying to communicate. They are not tombs. They are not temples in the conventional sense. They are messages in stone, designed to survive millennia and tell future civilizations what happened and when it will happen again. The precession of the equinoxes is a 26,000-year cycle caused by Earth's axial wobble. Ancient cultures were obsessed with this cycle. The Egyptians built the Giza pyramids aligned to specific stars as they appeared 12,000 years ago. The Mayans tracked precession in their long count calendar. The Vedic texts of India describe vast cosmic cycles tied to precession. Why did multiple ancient cultures, supposedly isolated from each other, all focus on the same astronomical phenomenon? Because precession marks the cycle. The Atlanteans figured out that catastrophic events cluster at specific points in the precessional cycle. When Earth reaches certain orientations relative to the galactic plane, when our solar system passes through particular regions of space, something triggers disaster. Maybe it is increased comet activity. Maybe it is gravitational effects we do not fully understand. Maybe it is something weirder involving electromagnetic fields and plasma physics. Whatever the mechanism, the timing is not random. Right now, Earth's magnetic field is weakening. The North Magnetic Pole has been moving faster and faster, drifting from Canada towards Siberia at accelerating speed. The field strength has decreased by about 10% over the last 170 years. Scientists assure us this is normal, that the field fluctuates and occasionally reverses polarity, swapping north and south magnetic poles. They say there is nothing to worry about. But magnetic reversals in the geological record are associated with extinction events. When the field weakens during a reversal, Earth loses protection from solar radiation and cosmic rays. The atmosphere gets stripped away at the poles. Mutation rates in living organisms skyrocket. Climate becomes unstable. And if a magnetic reversal coincides with increased comet impacts or solar flares, the combination could be civilization ending. Ice cores from Greenland and Antarctica show that past magnetic field weakening events correlate with dramatic climate shifts. The Last Champ excursion, a magnetic field collapse around 42,000 years ago, lines up with the extinction of Neanderthals and megafauna across Europe. The magnetic field dropped to about 5% of normal strength. Cosmic ray exposure increased dramatically. Cave art from this period shows people spending much more time underground, possibly hiding from increased radiation. We are in the early stages of another magnetic excursion right now. The South Atlantic anomaly, a region where the magnetic field is significantly weaker than normal, has been growing. Satellites passing through this region experience higher radiation exposure and equipment failures. The anomaly is expanding, and the field strength within it continues to drop. NASA and other space agencies monitor this closely but downplay the risks publicly. They talk about increased radiation exposure for astronauts and potential satellite damage, but never discuss what happens if the weakening accelerates or if we get hit by a major solar storm while our magnetic shield is compromised. The Carrington event of 1859 gives us a preview. A massive solar flare struck Earth, and even with a strong magnetic field protecting us, the results were dramatic. Telegraph systems worldwide sparked and caught fire. Auroras were visible as far south as the Caribbean. Compasses spun wildly. If an equivalent event happened today with our weakened field, the damage would be catastrophic. Power grids would fail. Satellites would be destroyed. Electronics would be fried. Modern civilization would collapse within days. But solar flares are not the only threat. The Taurid meteor stream, which Earth passes through twice a year, contains large objects that could cause impact events. Astronomers have identified dozens of kilometer-sized asteroids in this stream. Most pass harmlessly, but occasionally one comes too close. The Tunguska event of 1908, which flattened 2,000 square kilometers of Siberian forest, was likely a fragment from the Torrid stream. What if the younger Dryas impacts came from a larger body in the Torrid stream that broke apart? What if that same parent body still has fragments in orbit that we have not detected? We have mapped maybe 90% of the large, near-Earth asteroids, but smaller objects, things a few hundred meters across that could still devastate a continent, are much harder to track. One could appear with only weeks of warning. Comet ZTF, discovered in 2022, follows a highly elliptical orbit that brings it into the inner solar system approximately every 50,000 years. Its last close approach was around 48,000 BC. Its next approach will be in roughly 48,000 AD, except orbital mechanics are not perfectly predictable over such long timescales. Gravitational interactions with planets can alter trajectories. What if ZTF or something similar shows up ahead of schedule? The Maya long count calendar ending in December 2012 sparked widespread anxiety about apocalyptic predictions. When nothing dramatic happened, people dismissed Mayan astronomy as superstition. But the Maya never predicted the end of the world in 2012. They marked it as the end of a cycle, a time of transition from one world age to another. In their cosmology, we are now in the early stages of a new age, a period they associated with upheaval and transformation. The Hopi prophecies describe similar cycles. They say humanity has been through 3 previous worlds, each ending in catastrophe. The first world was destroyed by fire from the sky. The second world froze over. The third world was destroyed by flood. We are in the 4th world now, and the prophecies describe signs that will appear before its end. Seas turning black, land sinking into the ocean, strange lights in the sky, and humanity losing its way spiritually. Every one of those signs can be interpreted as describing modern conditions, ocean dead zones where pollution has killed marine life, making the water appear dark, coastal subsidence and rising sea levels causing land to sink, increasing reports of unusual atmospheric phenomena and UFO sightings. And certainly an argument can be made that modern society has lost spiritual connection and meaning. But here is what makes this truly frightening. The Atlanteans had all the knowledge, all the technology, all the advantages of an advanced civilization, and they still got wiped out. They knew the catastrophe was coming. The evidence suggests they tried to prepare. They built massive structures designed to survive. They encoded their knowledge in monuments and texts. They scattered survivors to distant lands with instructions to preserve what they knew. And it was not enough. Whatever hit them was so overwhelming that their entire civilization disappeared, leaving only fragments of memory in the myths of the cultures that came after. If they could not survive despite their advanced warning and superior technology, what chance do we have? The question is not whether another catastrophe will happen. The geological record proves it will. The question is when and whether we will be ready. Right now, we are not ready. Most people do not even know the threat exists. Governments are not preparing for civilization-scale disasters beyond basic emergency management. We do not have backup systems for food production if agriculture fails globally. We do not have hardened infrastructure that could survive electromagnetic pulses or extended power grid failure. We do not have seed vaults or knowledge repositories sufficient to rebuild if modern technology collapses. Actually, we do have one. The Svalbard Global Seed Vault in Norway holds copies of over 1 million seed varieties, stored in a facility designed to survive nuclear war and climate change. It is located in permafrost on an Arctic island, built to remain frozen even if power fails. The project was initiated in the early 2000s and continues to expand. Why did governments suddenly decide to build this in the 2000s? What prompted the urgency? Official explanations focus on protecting biodiversity against crop diseases and climate change, but the level of investment and the extreme security measures suggest they are preparing for something more severe. The facility is designed to survive essentially everything short of a direct asteroid impact. There are also data vaults. The Arctic World Archive in Svalbard, stores digital data on special film designed to last for centuries without power. Governments and corporations have deposited everything from national archives to open-source software to cultural heritage records. Again, why now? Why the sudden push to create backups of human knowledge in formats designed to survive civilization collapse? Some researchers believe governments have access to information they are not sharing with the public. Classified satellite data showing increased meteor activity, classified geological surveys revealing unstable volcanic systems, classified climate models showing abrupt change scenarios that would cause mass panic if released. They are quietly preparing while keeping the public calm and productive. The Hall of Records, supposedly hidden beneath the Sphinx or in a chamber under the Giza Plateau, represents the Atlantean attempt to do the same thing. Edgar Cayce, the famous psychic who died in 1945, described this chamber in remarkable detail during his trance readings. He said it contained records of Atlantean history, technology, and warnings about future catastrophes, sealed in a chamber that would be discovered when humanity was ready. Skeptics dismiss Cayce as a charlatan, but some of his readings have been eerily accurate. He described geographical locations that were later confirmed by archaeology. He discussed medical treatments later validated by research, and his descriptions of the Hall of Records align with radar surveys that have detected voids beneath the Sphinx, though Egyptian authorities have not allowed excavation. What if that chamber exists? What if it contains technology or knowledge that could help us survive the next cycle? The Atlanteans would have known their warnings needed to be preserved in a form that could survive millennia. Stone monuments could communicate timing through astronomical alignments, but detailed technical information would need to be stored somehow, in a format that future civilizations could eventually decipher. Some researchers believe the Great Pyramid itself is a sort of technical manual encoded in stone. The dimensions encode mathematical constants. The internal chambers align with specific stars at specific dates. The structure may have functioned as an astronomical computer, allowing pre-scientists to calculate celestial positions and predict cosmic events. If you understand the mathematical language, the entire building is a warning system. We are the inheritors of whatever the Atlanteans left us, the scattered fragments of their knowledge preserved imperfectly through oral tradition and megalithic monuments. And we face the same cyclical threat they faced. The difference is, we have science and technology that could potentially allow us to prepare better than they did. We can track asteroids. We can build hardened facilities. We can store knowledge digitally and physically in multiple redundant locations, but only if we acknowledge the threat, only if we take seriously the possibility that everything we have built could be destroyed, not in some distant future, but potentially in our lifetimes, or our children's lifetimes. The cycle does not care about our skepticism. The universe does not adjust its timing to accommodate our denial. The map from the French monastery is not just historical curiosity. It is a message from people who survived the last cycle, trying to warn us about the next one. They mark the location of their lost civilization, so we would know they were real, that advanced societies can fall, that nothing is permanent. They are screaming at us across 12,000 years to wake up and prepare. The question is whether we are willing to listen. In October of 2024, something changed. That map discovered beneath a French monastery was not supposed to be found. It was not supposed to be carbon dated. It was not supposed to be photographed and distributed to researchers worldwide before the authorities could seize control of the narrative. But it was. And now we know. We know that 12,000 years ago, someone possessed technology and knowledge that should not have existed. We know they mapped the entire world with precision that required an aerial perspective. We know they understood mathematics, astronomy, and engineering at levels we are only now beginning to match. And we know they tried to warn us about what destroyed them. But here is what most people do not know yet. In late October 2024, a thermal satellite survey of Antarctica detected massive geometric anomalies beneath the ice sheet in a region that matches coordinates indicated on the monastery map. The structures appear to be pyramids, 3 of them, arranged in a pattern identical to Orion's belt, exactly like Giza, exactly like Teotihuacan, the same signature that appears at megalithic sites worldwide. This information has not been widely reported. A few scientific journals mentioned the thermal anomalies briefly, attributing them to volcanic activity under the ice. But the geometric precision and the alignment are being ignored. Just like every other piece of evidence that challenges the official narrative, this discovery is being downplayed, dismissed, and buried. Except this time might be different. The researcher who discovered the Antarctic structures uploaded the full data set to multiple servers before reporting it through official channels. The raw satellite imagery is now circulating among independent researchers. Analysis confirms what the official sources deny. These are artificial structures, and they predate the ice sheet by thousands of years, which means Antarctica was once temperate, which means sea levels were lower, which means the climate was radically different, all of which aligns perfectly with the timeline of Atlantis, and the coordinates on the map place one of the primary Atlantean sites directly over these newly discovered pyramids. The establishment will fight this. They will question the data. They will attack the researchers. They will deploy every tactic in their playbook to prevent this information from reaching critical mass in public consciousness. But the genie is out of the bottle. The map exists. The Antarctic structures exist. The evidence is overwhelming, and it is accessible to anyone willing to look. In 2025, multiple private expeditions are being planned to investigate these sites. Wealthy individuals who are not beholden to academic institutions or government agencies are funding serious archaeological missions to the Azores, to the Richat structure, and yes, to Antarctica if permission can be obtained. The truth is coming out whether the gatekeepers like it or not. What happens when undeniable proof of Atlantis is presented to the world? When high-resolution imagery of underwater cities is broadcast globally? When artifacts demonstrating advanced ancient technology are displayed in museums that cannot be intimidated into silence? The implications go far beyond rewriting history books. It means reconsidering everything we think we know about human potential. It means acknowledging that civilization is fragile, that everything can be lost. It means confronting the cyclical nature of catastrophe and asking whether we are doing enough to prepare. It means questioning who has been suppressing this information and why. Most importantly, it means recognizing that we are not the first. We are not the pinnacle of human achievement, stumbling forward into an unknowable future. We are the inheritors of knowledge that was nearly lost, trying to rebuild what was destroyed, racing against time to rediscover what the Atlanteans knew before the cycle completes, and we face the same test they failed. The map is real. Atlantis was real. The catastrophe was real. And it is going to happen again. The only question is what we do with this knowledge. Do we dismiss it, ridicule it, suppress it until it is too late? Or do we finally listen to the warning that has been carved in stone, encoded in myths, and now literally mapped out for us by people who died trying to save us from repeating their mistakes? The choice is ours, but the clock is ticking. So what do you do with this information? First, share this video. The algorithms will try to suppress it, but if enough people watch and share, the truth spreads faster than it can be contained. Comment below with what you think. Do you believe Atlantis was real? Do you think governments are hiding evidence? Your engagement tells the platform this matters. Subscribe to this channel because we are not done. But more than that, start asking questions. Demand transparency from institutions that claim to serve public knowledge. When museums refuse to display artifacts, ask why. When archaeological sites are declared off-limits, demand justification. When scientific findings are classified, challenge the secrecy. The power to uncover truth does not belong to elites hiding in ivory towers. It belongs to all of us. And the Atlanteans left us a map. Now we just need the courage to follow it.